Welcome to the live stream for what is the April 4th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So welcome. I am a little bit early here tonight. Let's see. What did I just hit? I just hit a button. Hold on a second. There we go. Hi, Tanitri is here. Luna, Carolyn. Welcome. How's everybody doing? Diana, welcome. It has been a while. Truth Seeker, D Mel, Janet, hi, Bethany. So I have something kind of new and exciting to share with you guys. I got a standing desk over Easter weekend. So I'm super excited about it. And I also have a different chair. So we're going to see if this is more comfortable. So if you see me readjusting, the thing is, I'm only 5 feet tall. So sitting in the chair and standing up is kind of one and the same. So I don't know if you're going to notice a huge difference, but that's what's going on if you see me shifting positions. Kimmy says, how did I get this notification? Although I am interested. That's really weird, Kimmy. I don't know. It's normally the exact opposite of where people want to get notifications and then YouTube doesn't notify them. But welcome all the same. Hey, James. Welcome, Jennifer, Kiara, Wildflower. Yes, welcome, welcome. Sherry says, yeah, I'm 4'11". I totally get it. Yeah. Yes. The joy of being short. Chandy Love says, Dana, I don't participate in the chat much because I listen to you while during housework. Yes, I'm a big fan of talk radio in general, and that's one of my favorite things. I just put on a podcast or some sort of discussion on YouTube, and I do the exact same thing. I do housework, mainly housework or driving are my two big things. So Tanitria says, I just started reading your book, Start Here, and I love it. Oh, awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad. I am so glad. That makes my heart smile. Anju says, I can't seem to get on your 365 I Thrive page. Okay, I will work on that tomorrow because we're not going to be done here till like midnight or so. But we'll figure it out. Kiara says, hey, Dana, I wanted to ask you, since you've started doing YouTube, when you meet fans in public, do people try and dump their issues on you and make you a therapist without your consent? No, yes. I think it's always kind of been that way. My whole life with people telling me it's amazing. I could be at an airport. Actually, I was at an airport last time. Where was I? Flying back from seeing my mom. And this woman just, it's amazing. It's how so many people carry so much stuff. And all it takes is just kind of I think a smile and a person who is willing to listen and they just let loose. So sometimes I mind, most of the time I don't. And I've only met, I think, maybe a handful of people from YouTube who actually know what I do. Uh, but even then, like this gets the topic. So I I would expect for people to want to talk about this. And so I'm, totally prepared for it. It's when people like total random strangers start unloading where it's like, wow, that's, where did it come from? But I'm so interested in human behavior and uh, people's stories. I guess just kind of like the shared human experience of things that it doesn't, like I said, more often than not, I really kind of enjoy listening to people and what's going on in their life. So I've been a little freaked out to do meetups though. That's not something I've really gotten into because I've had, and I probably this goes for a lot of YouTubers out there. I've had some really kind of seemingly unstable people message me over the years. I've had some threats. Uh, that kind of stuff terrifies me. So actually meeting up with people and they know that I'm going to be there, I don't know that I don't know if I'll ever get into doing meetups and stuff kind of for that reason, just the safety concern. And yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Hey, George. You made it. Okay, let me scroll up. Diane says, "Am I late?" Nope. You're pretty much right on time. We start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday, and I started a little bit early today. Oh, that sounds amazing. A truth seeker says, "I just bought an athletic style inversion table for my bad back. It's amazing." I bet. My concern with those is I'm always afraid, like, what if I can't get back up or I have visions of all of the different ways that could go wrong. But I do have a like a yoga swing thing for aerial yoga, which I'm a huge fan of. And I need to still mount it in my house. I have it sitting here, but it's not mounted. But I used to go to a yoga studio and do aerial yoga on the weekends, and I that worked amazing wonders for my back. That was huge. Loved that. A&M Vlogs asks, "How do you pull away from a narcissist? I'm really trying hard to get away." I think it helps to write down all of the reasons that you want to leave and everything that they've done, like every single hurtful thing that they've done. And so you can continue to remind yourself because it's very difficult when you might have some good times with that person. It's if change is always difficult. And if we're wanting to kind of hold on to hope that they can change, if we're in denial about what we're experiencing, then we can really struggle with that cognitive dissonance of, maybe things aren't so bad, maybe they can be fixed, maybe things can change, maybe this time will be different, and so on and so on. But writing things down and really getting clear about how they are treating you and that things are not changing can really help cut through that cognitive dissonance so you can make a decision that's, you know, a healthier decision for you. Very cool. Carolyn says, "Today has been 4 months since I walked away and had no contact with my ex." That's exciting. That's huge. Good for you. Okay, let me scroll down here. Miss Ravenwind says, "Dana, I just threw out my narcissistic husband. I'm terribly lost. I live in perpetual silent treatment. Oh, I lived in perpetual silent treatment. He never started conversations with me. He emotionally cheated and lied like I breathe." Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit last week, how a lot of people struggle with kind of um, these two main things here. They're either abused or they leave and then they struggle with like profound loneliness. And so I think that's very common, especially if we've made this person our whole world or they've kind of insisted that we make them our whole world. And so reclaiming yourself, reclaiming your life, and I think maybe even that starts with rediscovering it, because I think a lot of people get out of these relationships and they're like, "I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know. I don't have friends. I don't have hobbies. All I am left with is just all of this pain, and I don't know how to move forward." I'm a big fan of, I think, trying to shore up kind of the dams of your support system. And I think a great way to do that is, in part, there's a website out there called meetup.com, and there's groups for everything, for crafting, for writing, for cooking, for camping, for dog park, things. There's just everything out there, and that can really be a great way to go. So I encourage people to join like a dozen or two dozen different groups, and go out there and start meeting people. A lot of the people on meetup.com are there because they're in some sort of life transition, divorce, they've moved, they're new to town, um, they're widowed, stuff's going on, or they're just kind of looking to expand their own support system or their own hobbies. So that can be a great way to kind of get out there and just start doing things in a more, I think, kind of safe way because, it's like you can leave at any time. So if you get out there and it's the general public. So it's really hit or miss. Sometimes you might go out there and find some people that you really click with, and then other times you might not at all. But hopefully, at least whatever happens, you're going to just have a good time, you know? Okay. Yes. Stephanie says, I'm very lonely and I attract more narcissists. I was love bombed for 16 years of an almost 20-year marriage. And the loneliness is a very big part of it, especially after that leaves. And if you come across one of these people that are incredibly charming and very likable and that do that prolonged love bombing where they come across and they stay like your perfect partner, but then the whole time they're living this double life, when all that ends, it can make a person feel very numb. And they can also really struggle with I think kind of being attracted to different people because everybody else kind of feels flat after something like that. Because these relationships, especially with that love bombing, tend to be so intense. And it can be hard to, I think, find yourself attracted to normal people, even as friends. Because, those charming narcissist types, they just create this whirlwind. There's just this level of intensity. And um, that can be a struggle to move past. But I think what helps with moving past it is realizing that it's love bombing. Like it's not real. It's very over the top. It's somebody that's trying to use charm in order to manipulate or confuse you. So, like I said, big fan of meetup.com. I think it's a really great place to start and you're in control. You can choose which events you want to go to. You can leave at any time. It's totally okay. And that can be a great way to just start kind of getting back out into life again. But I definitely wouldn't date. Dating when a person dates when they're lonely, it's sort of like going to the grocery store when you're really hungry. Like you're probably not going to make good decisions. And I think the odds of a person getting tangled up with another, really intense person, especially if that person's doing a lot of love bombing, the odds of that happening are very high. So I think it's important for us to make sure that we've really shored up the dams of our support system to where we have a life, that we're not looking towards another person to complete us, that we have our friends, we have hobbies, we have interests, that, find dating a person and um, dating a person is more of like the candles on the cake. We're not looking for them to be the whole cake kind of a thing. Okay. Okay, let's see. Kiara, interesting question. Says Dana, what's the difference between being passive and not reacting? I feel like reacting is necessary when protecting ourselves. But I hear you and Angie say don't react. What do you think? Okay. That's a great question. So there's a difference between reacting and responding. And so, like we were talking about yesterday, with trying to slow things down. So if a person's being actively manipulated, and a lot of us tend to get in that cycle of reaction. And oftentimes, if a narcissist or any type of manipulative person, if they're pushing our buttons, then it can be very difficult to not react because that's what they're trying to do. And, for any wide variety of reasons. But if you can slow things down and bring some space to your interaction with them, And I think anticipate, realizing, okay, these are the kind of buttons they normally push, or these are the things that they tend to ask me for, or these are the situations that the dance that I'm trying to not do anymore, whatever that might look like. Bringing some space to that. And so that way you can actually respond instead of have that knee jerk reaction. So in your situation that we were talking about yesterday, you were saying, if I remember correctly, you were feeling guilty for saying no. You were struggling with kind of setting some healthy boundaries there, which, totally, totally normal. This is all kind of a new skills for a lot of us, and it just takes practice. And so, like I was saying, anticipating what do they normally ask you? How, you know, are you feeling painted into a corner? And if so, realizing that you're not, like you can set the pace, that you're in charge, but it takes some practice regaining your power within that. And so, like I said, bring some space to that. So, whether that's saying, hey, if they ask you something, instead of immediately caving into it, saying, hey, I need to check my schedule, or you know what, I need to go to the bathroom, or um, I need to think about it, can I get back to you? Coming up with some phrases that you can say that can buy you some time, to where you're not feeling like you just need to react to what they're saying and fall into agreeing with them. So that's the main difference between reacting and responding. I hope that makes sense. People are talking about silent treatment, and Crystal says, I got the silent treatment to attempt to change my behaviors to suit his desires. Yeah, and that's very common. If a person, challenges them, questions them, disagrees with them, or if they might even pick a fight just so they can give you the silent treatment. Or and you might realize over time too, like, this is ridiculous. Like, they might get upset over, it took you 5 minutes longer to text them back, and they're like, well, you know what, you're just not interested. And then they leave it, but it's kind of their excuse to break up so they can go cheat, kind of stuff. That's very common. But yeah, silent treatment it's a grooming technique. It teaches a person, hey, don't bring this up. And if you do, there's going to be hell to pay. And the hell to pay is just that icy silence that's incredibly uncomfortable for the person on the receiving end of it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of, and a lot of people do silent treatment. Uh, that doesn't make it okay. And I think maybe another point to talk about that too is targets of abuse oftentimes will give silent treatment in response. And although maybe it's not even necessarily, I think it's different though. I don't think it's silent treatment. I think it's more of, they just realize that everything they say can and will be used against them. So they just get to this point where they just stop talking, because they realize, this other person's just looking for a fight, and they're looking for an excuse to be nasty to me, and so I'm just done. Like, I'm just done, because there's no point in even talking, because talking isn't resolving anything. So, and regardless, like I was saying, regardless of whether or not a person is a narcissist or not, if a person's giving you silent treatment, I think that's worthy of, definitely bringing it up with somebody, but it's also worthy of being a deal breaker. um, and just letting a person know, hey, you know what, I don't do silent treatment. And it's okay for you to be upset. It's okay for you to be frustrated, but, you know, I need a time for you to let me know when you plan on reopening communication, because I don't do that. Like, I'm not going to sit there and just twist in the wind, wondering if I'm ever going to hear from you again, wondering where I stand, wondering where we stand, you know, that kind of stuff. Ideally nip that in the bud a lot sooner than later. Synth asks, hi, Dana, is being single for a long time, like years, okay? Or is it due to attachment trauma? Well, there's nothing wrong with being single. So it's okay for you to be single for as long as you want to be single. It's dating, it's a jungle out there, and it can really be difficult to find a person that you click with. I think especially as we get older, because we realize like it's not as simple. When you're dating and you're 18 or 19, you're dating based on potential. There's so many things that aren't a factor, like children are not in the mix, grandchildren are not in the mix, finances, uh, career. you know there's so many things that don't come into play when you're dating when you're 46. There's so many other factors. It's, do they have children, and do if not, do they want children, and the children that they do have, how are they raising them, and how, is this does this work for your life? Or if they're really involved with their grandchildren, is th- you know is that something, does that fit in with your life, and vice versa, right? And there's just more things. The older you get, the more you realize there's so many components to actual lasting chemistry with another person that we just don't take into account when we're younger. But those things really do matter. And I think too, the more you have a life that you love, the less you're kind of willing to compromise on some of the more important things for you. Because yeah, I mean, anybody can get in a relationship and get married and stay married. That doesn't mean that that's actually a healthy relationship, and it doesn't mean that that's actually, an enjoyable relationship either. So, I mean, for me personally, I'd rather stay single than be in a relationship and just suffer. That's not something I'm going for. Uh, so then the attachment trauma thing, that could definitely play into it. I think a lot of people struggle with, they're terrified to get hurt again. And so they kind of put up some walls, and they kind of, they're scared to get hurt, you know? That's a very real thing. I think when you realize too, though, that when you get to that place where you know yourself well enough and you kind of make that declaration of, I'm not going to ever be treated like that again. I know what my deal breakers are. I'm just not going to put up with abuse, active addiction, adultery, or like a really rotten attitude. Like, I'm not going to do that anymore. And so it's a lot easier, I think, to walk away. Uh, from a relationship when you have those deal breakers in mind. I think knowing that you can walk away helps a person to really reclaim their power, because then we're not looking 100% to the other person to not hurt us. We realize, you know what? I'm going to go slow, and I'm going to try to, see them over a period of time and see if this is a good fit for me. So it's kind of making that mindset shift for starters of being focused on being choosy instead of being chosen. Whereas before we were so caught, we let the other person set the pace. We were so caught up with the love bombing and the whirlwind, and everything seemed so intense and so right. And now we kind of realize, okay, things need to go really slow. And, trust is something that's earned over time. It's not something that's just blindly given. It's not healthy or appropriate to just totally take strangers at face value, and to go slow, and then realize, okay, if they start acting in ways that fall within my deal breaker categories, maybe you bring it up. But if they don't change, or if their behavior is kind of really falls within like that, no go zone of, this is just egregious behavior, this is not even something I feel like it's worth bringing up, like I'm just done, then realizing that you can trust yourself to keep yourself safe, that you're never going to be on the hook like that again and just dragged through hell. And so I think once you realize that, then it's not so intimidating. It's not so like soul destroying as it was the first time you went through something like this, if that makes sense. Like, if you encounter another awful person, you know the signs, you know how you feel. I think making the declaration too of, I'm not going to be in a relationship or a friendship or any type of dynamic where there's that perpetual confusion and mental anguish. So I think if you can kind of stop that train early on, and that's how that stuff starts, it's mental anguish, perpetual confusion. if you can stop that early on, then it saves you a boatload of heartache down the road. So I think a lot of us got caught up in this stuff and my God, I don't know if there's any way around it other than experiencing it because it's hard to describe this stuff. It's hard to stay aware of it. Like knowing about it is one thing, but actually living through it's another. But after you've lived through it, realizing, okay, I'm not even going to do the mental anguish or the perpetual confusion. I'm just done. That in a way really sets you free because then you're not going to be on the hook again or for as long. Okay. Yeah. Duchess says, yes, always trust your gut. I think after going through this, no one can ever break me this bad again. Yeah. And if their behavior starts changing and they start doing squirrely things, I think now that we've gone through it and we've seen how awful this can become, we're going to be a lot more inclined to just be like, okay, I'm done. I don't need to sit here and wait for concrete proof that you're cheating or that you're lying more or that you're doing all these awful things. Like there's enough upfront stuff that this just does not work for me. I can't be in a relationship with a person that I don't trust or that doesn't feel emotionally safe. And I refuse to be in a situation that causes me perpetual confusion or mental anguish. I think that's really about thinking about truly valuing your safety and your sanity. And I think so many of us, like I was saying, we tend to stay in these situations waiting for concrete proof because we feel judgmental or mean for leaving, you know, sooner than later. So we kind of feel like, I need concrete proof that this person's cheating or that they haven't changed or that they really indeed, have an out of control drinking problem or sex addiction or whatnot. And it can be hard. It can be hard to like let go of that relationship and just realize, you know what, this just isn't going to work for me. So kind of along the same lines, I was watching an episode of Hoarders the other day, and it was really interesting. It was this guy, um, a couple, guy and a gal, and they had been dating for a while. And you would never guess that this guy was a hoarder. Really well dressed, really handsome, kind of, clean cut, just did not present like a hoarder. And his girlfriend had never seen his house. He always stayed over at her house, and he was always fine at her house. Well, then, the camera crew takes her in and she just is horrified. This, guy's got this beautiful home and it's just full to the brim of stuff. And they were interviewing her kind of, during this, and she had just said she was so torn. She's like, I love him, but I love me and I love my life and I can't have this in my life. And she's like, "You know what? Even if he gets help," she's like, I can't do it because there's always that chance that he's going to become a hoarder again." And she's like, "I just, that was a no-go," and she ended up breaking up with him. And I thought, that's got to be really difficult. But I thought, good for her for knowing where her boundaries are and just realizing, you know what, I'm just not even going to risk being dragged through hell with stuff like that. I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm not going to put up with it. And that doesn't mean that the hoarder guy was bad or wrong or whatever. It's he has this kind of active addiction to hoarding, and whether or not he actually gets to the bottom of that and is able to, live a happy, well-adjusted, reasonably tidy life is kind of to be seen, to be determined. But I thought that was really good that she knew who she was and she knew her line in the sand for stuff like that. Oh, good. Dora says, Dana, you really opened my eyes. And when I finally let him, oh, and when I finally got it, I let him go. I'm 200% free. Self worth. We are cracked, but not broken. I love that. Yes. Yes. And I think when that switch does flip and you do start seeing things clearly, and you start examining your deal breakers, there definitely is that moment. I think we've all been there of kind of, how did I get here? What is going on? And it's just so horrifying for us to realize how caught up in all of this we've become, and how long this has gone on for. It's just a very kind of sobering experience waking up to this. But yeah, waking up to it really can set a person free. And the cool thing is, not only does it free you from that relationship, it sets the rest of your life on a completely different and very positive trajectory. The way that you're going to be interacting with other people from kind of this point forward is forever changed. When you start getting more in tune with like your boundaries and your feelings and your wants and your needs, and realizing that you have value and that you can value your time and energy, emotions. There's just so much that we can really dig out of these types of experiences. And it can really just be almost just this magical turning point in our lives that might not have happened any other way. So there's a lot of like raw material there that we can definitely use for our highest and greatest good. And that's where I get excited and doing all of this, is hearing from people down the road of seeing those aha moments. I live for that. Like that's just the coolest thing when other people are like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize, my boundaries, or that this was my mother what treated me like this, and oh my god, I see it now. I see that I've been picking certain partners for these certain reasons, or I've been really lonely, and I keep getting caught up in love bombing with significant others or with friends. But now that I see it, I can start doing things differently, and I just don't get caught up in it anymore. And it just sets you free. I guess it's like anything else. There's that whole, awareness of a problem is always the first step. But man, that awareness is a huge step. It's really kind of bringing a lot of that subconscious stuff to our conscious awareness. And especially if a person's also being manipulated, kind of breaking that fog of manipulation and actually getting that clarity and seeing that light of what's going on. Huge. Ah, Bethany, so true. Says silent treatment uses our own mind against us. I would have the fight 50 different ways in my head because I didn't know what I'd done wrong or what the problem was. That is so well said and so spot on. I agree with you completely. It causes all of that mental anguish. And yeah, then a person does think like, well, maybe I should have phrased that differently, or maybe I shouldn't have brought that up, or maybe I am being jealous. And is this a problem, or like who has the problem? Is it them or is it me? Or I don't think this is a big deal, but I mean, I've never had this happen really before in other relationships. It's just with this one person. And am I really that difficult? Or, what's so wrong with our communication? Why can't I just seem to get through to this person? Why is everything a battle? Why is everything end up like this? And how can then we're in this scramble to try to get things back on track? But the reality is it was never about getting the silent treatment was never about trying to get things back on track. It was always about punishing us for challenging them because they're, you know, um, children, and they're damaged children in adult bodies. And they just, you're trying to be logical with an illogical person, and it just doesn't work. Thank you, Miss Ravenwind, for the live stream donation. I appreciate that. Oh, that's so true. Synth says it takes a lot of mental energy to make changes to your life. Yes. Yes, it does. And I'm a big fan of really tripling up on your self-care, especially I would say really during this first year, you know? And then I think too what you'll come to realize with doing that is that I think a lot of us tend to not do self-care on a regular basis. And then when you realize, oh, it's okay, I can triple up on my self-care, it's just sort of this aha moment happens of, well, wait a minute, why am I not doing this all the time? You know, like I need to learn how to love and honor and value myself before I can expect anybody else to do it. Because we kind of set the example for how we want to be treated. So I think that's huge in and of itself. But then yes, healing from all of this is definitely it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's oftentimes like pulling a string on a sweater. There's so much more to be learned about ourselves. And and this is just life in general, right? It's an ongoing process. And but like I was saying before, all of this stuff starts bubbling to the surface. So all of this stuff of that's been going on in our subconscious with our programming about who we're attracted to and why we're attracted to them, and different limiting beliefs that we might have that are driving our behavior, and all of this stuff is now questioned, and so we get to this place where we really are questioning everything about our entire life because our whole life is blown apart, and so now we're faced with reassembling the rubble. And but you've probably heard me talk about this before. The kind of beauty and magic in that is that you're building your life consciously. It's not based on other people's it's not based on what it should be, or what it was, or what other people think it should be, or the default life that we might have been living. It's now very conscious. You're choosing piece by piece of which to rebuild your life. And then it becomes really cool because then you're just living a life of purpose on purpose. So, Lauren says, I've just started fixing my hair again and shaving my legs and caring about my appearance. Yeah, that's, I think that's very common. It's a big part, I think, of depression for a lot of people where they're just overwhelmed and they just kind of quit caring. And, uh, you know, it's, I think one of the biggest challenges in all of this, and one of the biggest maybe lessons and rewards in all of this, is realizing that you matter and that it's okay to treat yourself with value. And so taking that time out for self-care and whatever that might look like. And sometimes it's those small victories of, you know what, I I shaved my legs today, or I showered today, or I cleaned out my car, or I did laundry. Self-care doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be these really grand events. Sometimes, I think oftentimes it's a bunch of little small things that we do to just treat ourselves with value. It's huge. The cool thing too, I think, with that is it kind of kicks off this chain reaction. So we kind of start building momentum in that direction. So, you take a shower, you shave your legs, you decide, oh, I'm going to, make myself a nice lunch. You might clean out your car. You might pay your bills that are overdue. You start kind of getting things back on track. And that kind of positive momentum will take a person, in a very positive direction. So it's like the saying goes, there's no such thing as small change. That's so true. So making time for those little bursts of self-care, 5-10 minutes here and there really do add up over time, especially with your environment. Like I said, I was watching that hoarder show, and I think one of the scariest mm, things about that show is I get it. I watch these people struggle with hoarding, and I think it kind of speaks to almost like the dark side within me. And I've been there, and I know how when I get really depressed, I can tell exactly what's going on by my external environment. And I quit. I don't even know if it's like a quit caring. I guess I do on some sort of level, but it's more of I just quit paying attention to things. Like things stack up. My car will become a mess. I can tell probably one of the earlier signs would be, my bedroom or my purse, and I guess and my car. It's randomness. Like my purse might have like a water bottle, a glove, you know, a pack of gum, just and a bunch of randomness, papers, old mail, stuff that none of it goes together. And then my room starts looking like that. And then my car starts looking like that. And then I tend to not see that that's happening until I have somebody over, or I have somebody in my car. And then it's like I can see it through their eyes, and then I'm horrified and deeply embarrassed. I'm like, how is how when did this happen? You know? And so I totally get that. I get how people's homes can become a hoarding nest. I get it. And that scares me because I don't want to get that. I don't want to get that far. I don't know. It's just, and my normal environment's very minimalist because for that reason, like I can't start bringing stuff in because things can start stacking up quickly, you know? So one of the ladies on the show had made a really great comment. She'd said she'd suffered some sort of major loss in her life, and this other lady was asking her, what is this? Like, how did it become this bad? And the lady said something so profound. She said, "This is what unshed tears look like." And it just like, broke my heart because again, I get it. I've been so overwhelmed where it's like mail stacks up and bills go unpaid, stuff that's not who I am starts happening. And it's scary to me how long that can go for before I'm aware that that's a problem. So I think taking the point of that is taking time, 5-10 minutes here or there and stacking, start building momentum in a more positive direction and kind of dedicating 10 minutes to just kind of clean up your space or take care of yourself or do your hair or whatever it is to start feeling good about yourself and being in the moment and valuing yourself and valuing your environment. Those little things really go a long ways because it is easy just to say like, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow," or "It's not a priority," or whatever. And the next thing you know, you've got a TV crew at your house and like it's just not good, you know? Okay. Uh Jennifer was saying, "Yeah, it's hard to break free from sentimental items, especially things from my narcissistic dad." Yeah, it can be, and that's the thing. Like I see these again, hoarding shows, and I get that mentality where everything has value to them. They're like, "No, I need this lip balm. Like if I, it's lip balm, and I need this index card holder because it holds index cards." And it's to the outside person, it's like it's just a bunch of stuff, but for them, it all serves a purpose. And especially if you're kind of doubling up with the significance of it, the emotional significance, it's even harder to get rid of stuff. I am not a some well, I guess I'm not a very sentimental person. I don't keep stuff. I try to hold on more to like memories of events. So because and I think that comes from moving so much where I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm moving around a bunch of furniture I don't even like because it belonged to somebody in my family at some point. Like this is just nuts. And so I really went through this whole phase of like kind of minimalism and like paring down. And it was very freeing to not be attached to my stuff. And there's only a few pieces of furniture that I have that I still have an emotional investment in, and they're beautiful pieces. But part of me really kind of wants to sell them just to break that emotional attachment to be totally free. And I struggle so hard with that because there's not a lot in my life that's made it this far with me in general. People, stuff in general. It's just, and that's, it's hard. Let's see. Yes, Bonnie says yes. Depression is unshed tears too. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. Lauren says, and now I'm cleaning. Way to motivate me, Dana. Good, good. I tell you that watching those hoarding shows totally motivates me. It was funny. I was watching one of them with a friend, and she's like, I can't do this." She's like, "It's making me want to itch." And I'm like, "Oh, it makes me wanna clean." I just love them because like I said, I think I can relate to that mindset, and it just scares me so much that I'm like, I don't like, I need to start cleaning because I don't want it to get that bad, you know? So, snaps snaps a person into cleaning, that's for sure. Heather says, "Dana, my entire house is a disaster, which is completely unlike me. I'm usually very OCD type A, but I really think it's because I just don't give a crap anymore." Yeah, I I I think a lot of that, our external environment's very often a reflection of our internal environment. And so I think if we can approach it from a place of compassion and non-judgment and curiosity, like, okay, this is very unlike me. What's going on? And then we can take corrective action because it's really easy to fall into kind of berating ourselves or being judgmental and that whole kind of critical parent voice, of geez, when are you ever going to get it together? And, you should know better and you're an adult now. And, all of those voices can start going in our head. But if we're like, okay, this is interesting. Now, why is this happening? What all has been going on? And because I think like that lady at the hoarders thing really nailed it. The hoard tends to be unshed tears. I think it's blocked emotion. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of people start hoarding after some sort of trauma in their life. So, you know, I think setting a timer really helps. Making it fun. It doesn't have to be like this serious, emotionally charged event, but uh, you can put on some fun music. You can make it into a game where you set a timer for 20 minutes and you just hit a room hard. I'm all about setting up ourselves in general for small wins. It just builds that momentum. So starting in a place that you can see progress, like starting in a bathroom, like a small room, or like your linen cabinet or your fridge, or, you know, or just making your bed and just realizing, okay, event happened in my life, but I'm not going to let it destroy my life. And so I'm going to climb out of this hole that I'm in, and I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to make it enjoyable, and I'm going to get going and put on some energetic music. Seriously, watch an episode of Hoarders. That'll for real motivate you, and be like, okay, this is me reclaiming my life. It's very powerful how that happens. Okay. Yeah, Richter says, yes, making it like a game, seeing how far you can go. Yeah, and it says depression is a hard wall to climb for sure. And then Jennifer says, I've been diagnosed with OCD, and it's not a sign of cleanliness and organization necessarily. I am the opposite. Well, and I think from what I understand, and kind of what I've even experienced in my own life, is for a lot of people that I think have OCD, it tends to be very hand in hand with anxiety. And I think with kind of the hoarding and, um, messiness, that kind of thing tends to go more hand in hand with depression. So it's interesting these different ways that these emotions manifest themselves because everybody experiences these things differently. But anxiety and depression, sadness, anger, these things have to come out, and they will come out. It's whether or not we're aware of the cause and effect. I think there's such a detachment, especially in kind of modern medicine, between all of this, with how tied in like our behaviors really are to our emotional state. So I think it's kind of an oversimplification of just being like, oh well, this is just it's a personality disorder. It's like, well, there's a lot to be said, I think, for examining the trauma in your life. I think so much of this stuff comes from unprocessed trauma and we're just not aware of it. We're like, oh no, I'm an alcoholic because it's a disease. Or, I'm morbidly obese because it's genetic, or because my thyroid, or because of PCOS, or some sort of, there's always something that people can point to be like, okay, these are contributing factors, but odds are, I would say that it's not the only things that are going on. So it's just interesting. And I think the more awareness you can bring to getting curious about yourself, what are some signs of how do you handle stress? How do you handle anger? How do you handle frustration? How do you handle, sadness? Because everybody, it comes out in different ways. Some people drink, some people eat, some people yell, some people hoard, some people shop, some people don't eat, right? Um, you know, I think the more you can get clear on how is this stuff coming out in my life, like looking at the results that you're getting in your life, and then getting real. I think the hardest part is getting real with yourself, just being honest with yourself of, okay, yeah, this is what's going on. This mess here, it's not just because I'm lazy. It's, oh my God, this is how my depression is coming out. I just quit caring. And so this is not knowing, okay, this is not normal for me. Like, I normally pay my bills on time. My house is normally clean, but man, it looks like a totally different person lives here. So realizing, okay, these are some certain warning signs if things are starting to go off track. If before maybe you had a glass of wine with dinner, but now you're having a bottle of wine with dinner, okay, that's a sign. There's these behavior changes here that are worthy of paying attention to, especially if they're affecting your life in a negative way. So, you know, worth examining for sure. Diane says, yes, my normal is way off. Yeah, it's common. Miss Ravenwind asks, if you throw them out, do they still hoover? I already had one attempt yesterday. Yes, they can. I mean, it's hard to say what another person's going to do, but I would say more often than not, they continue to try to circle back. So you have to kind of, I think, prepare yourself emotionally for that, kind of keeping your emotional shields up. If you were an old Star Trek fan, they'd go into kind of enemy territory, or the enemies would come to them and they're like, okay, shields up. Like, we're still going to keep moving forward in our life, but we have our emotional shields up. So this way you're prepared. Okay, this person, they might out of the blue send me a text or a phone call or an email or show up on my front door. What am I going to do? How am I going to handle that? And then that way, if it does happen, then you're not so knocked off balance by it, and it doesn't like destroy your week. So if you can kind of develop a plan of, okay, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and set all of their emails up to go directly to spam. I'm going to block their phone number. If they show up at my door, I'm just going to call 911. I'm not going to respond to this. I'm not going to fall into it. I'm anticipating that they're going to try to tell me everything I want to hear. This time will be different, that they're going to go to rehab, or they're going to find God, or that they found God, or that they want to go to therapy. They're going to start throwing out every single trick in the bag to try to get me back. And I'm not doing this dance anymore. I'm done. So preparing yourself instead of, because it's so easy to get caught up in, well, but you know what? They never offered to go to therapy before, but now they are. Or they never would go to church with me before, but now they're willing. And so should I give them another chance? Should we try to make this work? This is where it goes back to you finding out where your deal breakers are, because they will continue to push around until they can find a soft spot. So don't look to their behavior to try to determine whether or not you should try to make this work again. You need to ask yourself, at what point am I just done? Like, where is my line in the sand? At what point is enough enough? And I can't keep doing this dance of madness. Like, we're not, I've been doing this for too long now, and I'm done. Miss Ravenwind says, "Yes, the day I threw him out, he wanted marriage counseling." Oh my god, this is crazy. Yeah, that's very common. They will say whatever they think it takes. It's, a bunch of talk and it's a bunch of promises. And Jennifer asks, "Is there a difference between a psychologist and a psychotherapist? There's so many labels." Psychotherapy is something that that certain mental health clinicians do. So, sort of like you have physical therapy, which is therapy for your body. Psychotherapy is kind of like therapy for your mind or for your thinking. So it's what they do. Psychologists do psychotherapy. Social workers can do psychotherapy. I think it's more of a fancy term for just saying therapy. So, but within that, there's different types of therapy. So there's like, dialectical behavioral therapy, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, there's, I mean, like lots and lots of therapies out there. So, and then that can be a little bit confusing too. Uh, I think it's more about kind of finding a good fit with a person. Because, yes, there are so many different approaches to all of this and kind of degree paths and what have you. So, you have psychiatrists, and those are medical doctors who are trained in more of like, well, they're doctors, so they're more trained in like the medical portion of diagnosing, but kind of the main tool in their toolkit is medication. So they're oftentimes going to be doing more of like medicating people. So they're a great person to go to if you're seeking more of kind of that chemical, medication, basically. So they oftentimes don't do real therapy. They're going to kind of check in with the person and see what they're doing, but then their approach is going to be more of the medical side of things. Um, Social work tends like a master's in MSW is going to tend to take more of a, I would say, like a social or family, like a larger approach to kind of what's going on with a person. Uh, a psychologist is going to be more trained in, I think, more of the kind of research and um, different approaches with therapy. So, and it's kind of, and I might not be the best person to be answering this. So, this is just from my understanding of it. Then you have licensed um, LPCs, licensed practical, is that right? Licensed professional counselors. And they also learn about psychology, and there's also, there's definitely talk of like family dynamics and kind of different family systems theories and those kinds of things. That's not so heavy into like the research and the different types of approaches. So, but there's value and benefit to all of them. And like I said, it depends on the person and the rapport that you have with them. And I value results more so than the different degrees that a person has. Like I would take Tony Robbins any day of the week over a psychiatrist. So it's just finding that good fit with somebody and then kind of getting that game plan of what are what's the plan of action, like what kind of results are you hoping for, and they'll normally, whoever it is will normally talk to you about that up front, maybe the first or second session of, okay, what are your goals, why are you here, what are you wanting to work on, and then you're kind of going to start working in a certain area. I was seeing a gal, this was years ago. She was absolutely fantastic. She was a nurse practitioner. So, very similar to a psychiatrist and the fact that she could prescribe medications, except she was, you know, kind of more into a lot of psychiatrists. It's, 15-minute appointments, you're in and out, it's med checks. There's not like an hour-long visit like there would be with a therapist. And she just was fantastic. So, it, so it just, you have to kind of, I think, try a few and see what fits and see kind of be, examining what kind of results am I getting and am I getting anywhere? Am I making progress in the direction that I want to head? But I will say, from what I've heard, I have not done these therapies, but I've heard wonderful things from a lot of people who have, is EMDR and EFT therapies are showing to be very effective for people trying to overcome PTSD. And I think probably trauma of any kind. So that might be worth looking into. And there's even videos on YouTube that'll walk you through the EFT process. It sounds really woo woo and I'm not even really sure how much I buy into it, but like I said, I have friends that are therapists, I have friends that are psychiatrists and they both are shocked. They're like, this is amazing as to like how well that EFT therapy works. So it's tapping where you're moving, like you have a statement and then you kind of move through these different energy meridians. I don't know. It's supposed to help release like kind of these blocked emotions, sort of like the like acupuncture, but with you're putting pressure with your fingers, not needles. So might be worth looking into. Uh, Richter says, how do you get past not getting closure or the answers that you're looking for? I think by educating yourself about the kind of person that you're dealing with and realizing that you have to give yourself closure. That sometimes we're never going to know the whole truth, right? Probably never even going to know a big chunk of the truth. And I think coming to peace with that's enough. Like what we know is enough. And that the closure for us is going to be ending things, just shutting that door and walking away is is huge. And I think too, visualizing that, like truly visualizing yourself just being done and just shutting that door and like locking it and then walking in another direction is very powerful because all you're going to ever get from them is more manipulation and more lies. And our closure has to come from rebuilding our life and moving in a positive direction and just realizing, like the kind of person that there are people that walk this earth that don't have a conscience. And that maybe the person that we were with was one of them. And I think kind of that just knowing that can sometimes be closure enough. But it is a struggle. And Duchess says, and always be careful. Uh, a narcissist can be a counselor, and if they don't feel right, find another. Yeah, having good rapport with somebody, it's like going to any other professional, whether it's an accountant, a home builder, a landscaper, you know, you're uh, somebody who's going to paint your house. You're going to have a plan of like, hey, this is why I'm coming to you. This is what I'd like to work on. If you're getting a weird vibe from them, or if you kind of realize you're like, hey, you know what? I said I wanted my house to be painted gray and you painted it bright blue. Like we're not on the same page here, right? And so it's the same thing with any person in any profession of, hey, this is kind of the game plan I'm here to work on my anger, or I'm here to kind of, I feel like I have PTSD from this relationship and I just need some help. If you're not on the same page and you feel you're getting a creepy vibe from them, if you feel like you're just not getting through, that you just don't click, that they don't um that they don't believe you, that if you're just not comfortable, and it happens, I mean it happens, and there might be not be anything wrong with them. It's sometimes rapport is a funny thing that way. Sometimes you click and sometimes you don't, and that's totally okay. But especially if you're getting a creeper vibe, because I think a lot of people, myself included, tend to think that certain people in certain professions are just instantly safe. Like, okay, well, this person is a therapist. So therefore that means that they're, a safe person that I can open up to them, that, um, that like they're actually emotionally healthy, or that this, auto mechanic actually knows what he's doing. And, it's like sometimes that happens. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So it's important to, if you're uncomfortable, it's okay to find somebody else. And it might take going to a few different people in order to get comfortable. And I would be curious to know how many, and I think on average, most people go to about 3 to 5 therapy sessions and then they're done. And probably for a wide variety of reasons. But I think a lot of people tend to kind of go from therapist to therapist for a wide variety of reasons. So it's just finding that good fit. All right, let me scroll up. Jennifer says, I wish there was something I could do that would be more effective than cognitive behavioral therapy. I guess because I've been in therapy for 4-ish years now. Yeah. I would encourage you to try EFT or EMDR. And oftentimes people report like major results with that within just a few sessions. So, and I don't think you have to completely like start over with a new therapist. You can go to a therapist just to do EMDR, or EFT, and go through a few of those sessions, and then go from there to kind of evaluate, like, hey, is this working? Can I kind of get my own little treatment team together, you know and go to this one therapist for EFT, and then, but boy, I really like that other therapist, we're doing the cognitive behavioral therapy, and that therapist is just so easy to talk to, and I really enjoy my time there, but I feel like, you know we're not really moving the ball down the field, so let me try some other approaches and just kind of see what happens. So, you know, it's a lot of this is just very trial and error. Up yours, Narc, says Dana. What you just said about how expressed trauma or unexpressed trauma manifests is absolutely genius. Yes, society is quick to label. It's more nuances than that. It should be explored more. Yes. Yeah, I agree. Making that mind body connection is so huge. There were two books that come to mind that I read that were just so game changing for me. And I think I'm not even think, I know a person really needs to be at a certain place in their healing, and at a certain mindset in order to, I think, like absorb those kinds of messages. So those two books are You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, and The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. So the You Can Heal Your Life, what's interesting about that, I had a friend give me that book after my first narcissistic relationship, after that ended. And that book did not resonate with me at all. I'm like, this is just a bunch of double speak. I don't even get it. Like, I just really don't get it. And I kept the book, and then I picked it up about 6 years later, and it made a ton of sense to me. But there's a lot of stuff in there that I could come across as very um, kind of victim blaming, and I don't know. So kind of proceed with caution with that book. But also The Body Keeps the Score, he really talks about, so they both talk about that in those books, of kind of that mind body connection and how stuff can manifest in different ways and how it's expressed in different ways. And I agree. I think that's absolutely life changing, you know, um, understanding that. And it is really cool when we start to examine kind of our defaults for behavior. So we can kind of keep an eye on it, because man, I tell you, it's easy. It's easy. These anxiety, depression, grief, all of these intense emotions, even though they might happen after a major event, it's just kind of like this slow descent into things becoming a big problem. And it's really hard for any of us to see that things are becoming a problem when it just is slowly and progressively getting worse and worse. So, if you can become aware of how this kind of stuff normally, what's your pattern? If you were to look at your life as a scientist, or yeah, like a scientist, non-judgmental, like you're just curious, here is participant A, and you just kind of walk around your space or your car and you see it through the eyes of a neutral third party. Like what would they make of this? And so kind of seeing our own behavior that way and figuring out, okay, yeah, this is how I normally cope. Like I was really shocked to learn that I emotionally eat. I did not realize that uh, for a long time. And then once I gained, I don't know, 20 pounds or so in the past, I don't know, year ish. And then my clothes began getting tighter and tighter, and I couldn't figure out what was going on because I was aware that I was eating, of course, but I was never eating like a whole gallon of ice cream or a whole bag of cookies. It was never any extreme eating that I thought, boy, that's really out of the ordinary. It was just, you know, a handful of cookies here, a handful of cookies there, those kinds of things. And then all of a sudden, these think you looking at your results of like, hey, my clothes are getting tight. This is really weird. What's going on? Or for me, also it was realizing, hey, you know what? I am eating a lot of fast food and I don't even like fast food. And even if I have a fridge full of food at home, I'm still choosing to go eat fast food. What's going on here? And, just bringing that stuff to our awareness because I think so many things like food, like hoarding, it's not just about being lazy or um, having a problem with like disorganization. Like there's more going on there. And with weight, it's not about, calories in, calories out. Like people know how to eat healthy, right? Like they know how to eat healthy. They know that they need to exercise. It's it's not what we're eating, it's what's eating us. And so kind of resolving those kind of deeper issues of what's going on. What are we trying to run from? Or what are we trying to self-soothe? How are we self-soothing? It's just such a game changer. Okay. Now let me scroll down. And that too, Camilla says, Dana, I lost 10 pounds after my divorce. I didn't realize how much less I was eating. Yes. Okay. So that's a good example, right? So then the opposite of that. So some people overeat, some people undereat. Some people become incredibly, the hoarding and really messy. And then some people go the opposite way and they become very controlling and very regimented and with their behavior. Um, some people can go through, let's say, for example, like it's a sexual trauma of some kind. Some people can really become terrified of other people. They don't want to date. They really wear very baggy clothes. They just want to kind of become invisible. Other people become incredibly promiscuous. So it's just everybody, this stuff manifests in different ways for different people. You know, it's interesting how the human brain works and how we handle stuff. I I feel like I've gone but I've done a lot of extremes in my life and that's always interesting to me like well that's why why was it coming out in that way. And what I've noticed like with weight stuff is I tend to eat if if I'm depressed or overwhelmed. I tend to lose weight if um if I'm anxious and I feel out of control. So like I get depressed if I have control over something, but I'm overwhelmed by it because I'm just overwhelmed. Like I don't have the emotional strength to actually do what I need to do. But I'm fully I need but there's things I have control over. Like I could get myself out of this hole. I just don't have the emotional strength or the energy to do that. I tend to lose weight when I feel like very out of control and I'm in a kind of a panicked, frenzied mess. And it's the same. Like I'll drop weight like crazy and then just be like, oh my gosh, I've eaten a bagel all day or a bagel for the past 2 days, kind of a thing. So yeah, that kind of stuff within ourselves. Like, why do you do what you do? You know? And can you find any patterns there? Okay, let's see here. Yep, that's very true. New Chris says, yeah, anxiety shuts the appetite right down. It's part of that whole flight. That makes total sense. Yeah, just that adrenaline going off nonstop. It just kills your appetite. That makes total sense. One of the things I've realized lately, I don't know, watching some YouTube video. I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. So, like I was saying, I was craving all this fast food, and I'm like, I do not like fast food. This is so weird. Why am I doing this? I was watching this video, and they were saying, when you have stress, it really increases your cortisol. And one of the things that helps to decrease cortisol is basically like high fat foods help. I would think it helps to increase serotonin, but then there's also a hit of dopamine with like sugar and certain things like that. So your body at a deeper level is trying to regulate these chemicals in your body. And I'm like, that makes so much sense because my body was like screaming for foods that I don't normally eat. And then, I watch these shows of like My 600 Pound Life or whatever. And again, like I can see that mentality where somebody is like orders a whole pizza and they're just this food addict and it's kind of caught up in this whole cycle of like the dopamine hit from the food, but then the cortisol release from all of the stress, but then needing kind of that added boost of the sugar and the carbs to feel good again because then you feel depressed again, then you need the food to feel good again. And it's horrible to get caught up in that cycle, and it's so scary when a person things can get so far, um, that it can kill you. Like it's heartbreaking. So okay, Miss Ravenwin's asking about smear campaign. She's saying her ex did a smear campaign on her. She says, why is he doing a smear campaign? He's states away. Okay, it's a really great point. There's, I think, multiple reasons you have a person like that do a smear campaign. Generally, it's to kind of do damage control, right? So, excuse me, they might say, so they can make you the bad guy. They can play the victim. I think all narcissists play the victim because it's never ever their fault. That's a big part of it, right? They're always right. It's, you know, they just because they can rationalize their behavior in their own mind, they confuse that with being right. But there's a big difference between rationalizing something and actually being correct because they just rewrite reality on the fly. And so part of that smear campaign is them doing damage control. Part of that is also them rewriting reality in order to kind of fit their internal narrative. So it's to protect their self-image on one level, but it's also to protect their internal image. It's to protect their own self-ego. So oftentimes they might need to feel justified in mistreating another person. If they've been lying and cheating and stealing and doing all these horrible things, they have to justify that to themselves. And so that's when you get a bunch of nonsense, right? Of like, oh, well, yeah, okay, I cheated with all these different people, but it was because of you, right? You weren't home enough. You gained weight. You lost weight. You dressed too sexy. You didn't dress sexy enough. It's always somebody else's fault. She threw herself at me, blah, 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 blah. Like it's always something. Or, you know, they stole money from your children's college fund. Oh, well, you know what? I did so much for those kids. They owed me, or they were never going to go to college anyhow. Little Jimmy, you know, he'll be lucky to graduate from high school. I mean, or I'll repay it. You're making a big deal out of nothing. You know, they're 14. They're not going to go to college for another 4 years. I can repay it by then. God, you're so selfish. Don't you even understand? Like I needed a new car. And so, why don't you want me to have nice things? Why are you so mean to me? Kind of, I mean, it's just, it makes your head spin, right? When you're on the receiving end of this, you're like, I cannot believe I'm having to explain to this person why it's wrong that they drained their child's college fund because they wanted a brand new car. And they don't seem to have any accountability for that, or awareness or insight. So it's kind of the same thing with that smear campaign. Like, they have to justify their behavior to themselves or to make themselves look good. It just speaks to the level of, um, irrational behavior on their end. That's a very good point. Evil Ed says, I always knew I had some part in my toxic relationships. I just couldn't figure out what part and how to fix it. Yeah, I think that's probably most of us. And, but in the case, I think the difference is it's our part isn't necessarily have anything to do with the relationship itself. So I think there's this kind of normal way of understanding relationships of, oh, it takes two to tango. It's uh there is no kind of there is no individual issue in a relationship. It's a relationship issue, so like both people are equally to blame. But if you're with a, you know like, really pathological person who chronically lying, chronically cheating and stealing and manipulating and controlling, and it's just a bunch of that, then it's not a relationship issue per se, in that you did something, they did something, that your behavior is contributing to that. It's more of a relationship issue in the sense of who we're choosing as a partner, and kind of where our boundaries and standards and deal breakers are in all of this. And it can be very interesting to kind of go back and look at patterns in your life. I think this is especially so with men, because this stuff really tends to fly under the radar for them. So going back through, okay, what are the significant relationships in your life, with significant others, with friends, with parents, maybe with coworkers or bosses? And then kind of what have been the really problematic relationships in your life? And then kind of listing out, okay, what was the appeal of this person? What all was going on in your life? Like, were you new to town? Was this a brand new job? Were you incredibly lonely? Had your partner just died? Like, what kind of extenuating circumstances were going on at the time? And did that relationship, was it very much this kind of deep intensity or this deep connection to the other person? And was this whirlwind? So if you can start kind of seeing, okay, man, there's a pattern here, there's a lot of things that repeat between a lot of these different relationships, then okay, there's something more going on here. So, I've mentioned before in other videos, one of the big game changers, kind of aha moments for me, was in doing that exercise and then realizing, okay, this is a pattern that's been going on in my life, but I didn't realize that it was a pattern. And so the pattern was, I kept getting caught up with that love bombing and that level of intensity and those whirlwind dynamics, whether it was at work or was with a significant other or with a friend. And I was misreading all of that intensity as sincerity. And so that person really came across as like, oh man, this is an amazing person. We have so much in common. Like, they're my new BFF, or like, this is my soulmate. And things just picked up steam quickly. And it felt so right because it was meeting this need within me that had been there for a very long time. And I because that need had been unmet for a long time, it had turned into a big vulnerability of mine that I was blind to. So once I was aware of, oh my God, like that's what's been going on. I've been misreading a lot of this my whole life. Then I was able to slow things way down, and that love bombing no longer became attractive. I remember going to therapy and talking to a therapist about it. And people always talk about, oh, women like bad boys and this, that. I'm like, I don't. Like, I've never liked that. And I never was really attracted to the overbearing, aggressive, alpha kind of stereotype of a guy. Like, that's never attracted me. It's, but I've kept getting caught up with um, problematic men, but I wasn't identifying it because I'm like, they're not bad boys. They come across as really amazing men who happen to live like really horrific double lives. So um, that kind of kept me in the dark for a while. But once I realized, oh, this was the repeating theme, but that theme can manifest in a bunch of different ways because some women, that intensity is really what it boils down to. That level of intensity can come across as a bad boy or a bad girl, right? Um, kind of this rogue outlaw kind of person, or it can come across as just their full attention is on you in these kinds of things. So I think, and then two, realizing, okay, what is this need? Like I was saying before, having this unmet need. And so for me, it was I had walked around feeling very unloved and very unimportant for a very long time. And I didn't realize that I felt that way because that was just normal for me. So you see a lot of people that are out of divorces. They've been married for 20 years, they get divorced, or their spouse suddenly dies, and now they're dating again, or maybe they're date after a year, and they're profoundly lonely. Well, they still have that same empty bucket of like they're walking around feeling really unloved and unimportant and maybe lonely and kind of scared and all of that, and boom, that's prime pickings for a really a charming manipulative person, male or female. So examining in your own life, what are the repeating themes? What are some empty emotional buckets that you might have? So I gave you the example that was my empty bucket. And then once you realize what your empty bucket is, then you can work towards getting it filled. There was a guy that came to my channel a couple years ago, and he was struggling with trying to figure out why he kept getting tangled up with all of these really problematic women. And then he realized his emotional bucket was the need for stability. He grew up, I think it was a foster home. He was shuffled around a lot in his life. His um, birth mother was, I think she was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and there was no stability in his home. And so he was craving that stability. And so whenever he would find a woman and get into a relationship, he didn't want to let go of that because he craved, he was starved out for that stability. But once he realized, oh my God, that's what I've been doing, and this is why, he was able to just kind of break the chains of that because he was able to bring that kind of subconscious driver to the forefront of his mind. And it's again, it goes back to that whole awareness of a problem is a really big first step. So, yeah, it's big to start examining if we're caught up in a pattern of behavior. It's one thing if it's a one-time event. Anybody can get caught up with these people. Okay? But if there's a pattern, it's worth examining what's going on here. But like I said, the good news is sometimes it doesn't take years of therapy to uncover this stuff. If you can kind of think about, okay, how does this problematic behavior start? What am I misreading, if anything? Am I missing some pieces of the puzzle? So if you can even just get a few of these pieces kind of clicked into place, it's just like it's a game changer. Nikki says, "Oh my gosh, this is my dad. Stole so much money from me and he still says I owe him." Yeah, and so then like what you're seeing is him rationalizing that, right? I've done so much for you, you uh you owe me, but that's gosh, and that's the thing with that kind of behavior because you're not dealing with a rational person, you're dealing with a rationalizing person. And I think it's very common, especially for narcissists. You hear, I'm sure in the community, people talk about that. They're like, man, all these gifts come with strings attached. I'd really rather not have the gift because I don't want the strings. They might give me $100 gift, but my God, it's going to come with the price tag that I'm going to have to repay them tenfold. They're going to hold it over my head forever. It's because with that kind of personality, it's always about a power struggle and it's always about them winning. So if they do something nice for you, now you owe them like forever because they did something nice for you. It's just it's exhausting. Yep. Dandelion says, after all I've done for you, it's a very common narcissistic manipulation. Yep. Okay, let me scroll up here. Fairy Magic says, I always say the narcissist never met a rationalization he didn't like. Isn't that the truth? That is so right on, and it's really wild to see them start rewriting reality on the fly. George and I was texting me the other night. We were talking about Jodi Arias and her trial and how her story kept shifting. And it was I missed like large chunks of the trial. I don't know where I was in all of that, but I did not realize that her story had shifted so much, and it's really wild to just watch her go from lie to lie to lie to lie to see kind of like, okay, will you believe this? Well, okay, how about this? Okay, well, how about this angle? Well, how about this angle? And it's just, you're just watching this person. I had experienced something similar with with Steve, where it was at the tail end, it was throwing out all of this craziness. It was all of these lies, and it was that kind of shape shifting. It reminded me of the scene in Terminator 2, where the guy, the liquid metal Terminator guy, goes into the molten, what is it, molten metal, and he's trying to save himself. And so he keeps resurfacing out of that molten metal and he keeps taking different shapes. Like he's John Connor's mom, then he's Arnold, then he's Sarah, then he's, all of these, then he's the cop again, then he's just all of these different people. And then until he finally realizes that he can't shapeshift his way out of this. And then he dies. And it's so much like a narcissist where they just throw a bunch, it's like they're just throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall trying to see what sticks. It's really wild when you see that kind of stuff. Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll up. Nisi says, it's so true. Loneliness is my emotional bucket, and that's how I attracted my narcissistic husband. And here's the thing too, is we all have vulnerabilities. It's a big part of being human. And it's not so much trying to get rid of all of these different vulnerabilities in our life, but it's at least being aware of what they are at the time. So if a person is if you realize, man, you know what, I've been really lonely for a long time, or my spouse died, or I'm new to town, or um, I feel like my parents never loved me, or whatever it might be that you're struggling with, at least kind of having that on the forefront of your mind of, okay, this is a vulnerability. And around other people, this could definitely be exploited. So I kind of need to keep my emotional shields up for if I'm feeling like that's being exploited. And I think one of the ways that we can tell if it is being exploited is in large part based on how we feel. If we start feeling, and let me back up and say that it's if it's being exploited, we can feel like this, but also the other person may not even necessarily be exploiting it, but if it can just be a sign of, I think, how starved out we are. I guess what I'm saying is the warning sign is feeling like you've met the perfect person. So that's a big problem. And it's a great sign that we're not seeing the other person clearly because there are no perfect people out there. If we're thinking, oh boy, this man is my knight in shining armor, that's its own level of problem, frankly. Because then if we're thinking that we need to be rescued from our own life, then we need to really do the work to fix our life to something that we don't need to be rescued from. Because if we're looking for somebody to rescue us, then that's going to keep landing us with a bunch of the wrong men. Either we're going to find men that are codependent and trying to fix us, or controlling and try to fix us. Generally, one of those two. But with more of that kind of white knight in shining armor kind of guy who's looking for that damsel in distress. Once that damsel is no longer in distress, he's going to move on. So that's kind of never healthy to need somebody else to rescue us from our own life. But um, what was I even saying? The oh, eh, Prince Charming, perfect man or woman, right? Princess Charming, incredibly charming, smooth talking, tells us everything we want to hear. It feels like a fairy tale, or that feeling that we've met a soulmate, and that deep level of connection. Only time will tell if that's really there because, like I said, there's no perfect person. And it's a sign. So if you're starting to feel that way of, boy, this person seems too good to be true, at a minimum, it's a sign that we're not seeing them clearly and that we really need to slow things down and spend less time with them and just slow things down to where we're not so emotionally invested in this situation, because the more emotionally invested that we are in it, the less we're going to see things clearly. This is one of the reasons online scams work so well. So, that scammer is going to just shower their target with love bombing, with all of this attention, all of this affection, talking to you for hours upon hours every day, talking to you in the morning and then before you go to bed and then during the day, and sending you pictures, and it's just so much. But to a person who's starved out, it feels amazing. It feels like you've met this perfect person because they make you their whole world. But to a person who's not starved out, they're like, yikes, that's smothering, that's creepy, that's too much. You guys are moving too fast. That's just weird. So it's interesting. And it's the same thing, like I was saying with going to grocery shopping, right? Like if you go grocery shopping and you're really hungry, you're not going to make good decisions. And it's everything looks amazing, right? Especially the stuff that's bad for us. If we go to the grocery store and we've just eaten, man, we're making much better decisions. It's it's filling those different buckets before we need them filled, I guess is what it is. And this is why kind of going back to these emotional needs buckets, because here's the thing too, a lot of people tend to be like, oh, I'm especially later on in life, are like, man, I'm really lonely. And uh, and so maybe the only way that they really know how to get that need met, especially if let's say they were married for 20 years, and so their spouse really did the job of filling that emotional needs bucket for them. Let's say they get divorced or their spouse dies, and they might even have friends, but they're like, man, I they're so used to having that other person 24/7. It's what they tend to do is like, I'm really lonely, I'm going to go out and date, and then that very rarely ends well. So I'm a much bigger fan of like spending time with friends, cultivating hobbies, going to meetup groups, really developing getting that bucket filled from a wide variety of sources. So then we're not looking to this other person to meet all of our needs or meet the vast majority of our needs. because it's just it's too much, you know. James says, yeah, they do start like the texting and the calling all the time. And once they feel they hook you, then they start to do everything less. Yeah. And, on some level, this level of like idealization is normal from for people when they start dating. It's exciting. Like there's all of these, those dopamine and all of these chemicals going through, and you're like, man, nobody's I guess the point is nobody sees anybody clearly for like the first 90 days. And there's just this excite especially if you have this chemistry with the person and you're excited and you just you're they text you or they call you and it's just like, oh, it's exciting. And it's just these it's just all of this feel good stuff. But and then people, you know, kind of get more comfortable with each other and they settle in, and that idealized stage kind of fades out into more something that's more substantial. And then a lot of people tend to feel like, boy, this person's really changed. But I think it's a lot like a job interview versus actually working there, right? Like the job interview, everybody's on their best behavior. Your employer's on their best behavior. You're on your best behavior. Everybody spends like the next hour kind of lying to each other, putting their best foot forward, right? And then it takes a little bit. And maybe the first week or two is really great at the job, but then you start seeing things, you're like, that's kind of a problem. Or, ooh, they really want me to work a lot of overtime without getting paid. Or you start to see the reality of the situation. Relationships are the same way. So people kind of put that best foot forward, but they're not being their 100% authentic self because we're focused on trying to impress the other person, and we want to impress the other person because we like them. But it just takes a while for the reality of who they are and of us being comfortable enough to be ourselves happens. And that tends to take about a solid 90 days or so in a relationship, sometimes sooner, but about 3 weeks to 90 days. So kind of going slow, realizing that this is totally normal. Many relationships tend to feel like there's amazing chemistry, that you finally met the one, that this is it. And that's just part of falling in love, and or falling into lust, I guess, and to slow things down. And this is also why it's important too, if you are doing online dating, don't let somebody soak up a bunch of your time. Because there's a lot of people out there that are married, that have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or that are scam artists, or that have no intention of ever meeting you. They just like to flirt. They're bored at work. They don't, and it's just anybody can be anything online. And with online dating, it's really got to be go slow and just not take anybody at face value. Like time will reveal itself. So I'm a big fan of, hey, let's talk on the phone, maybe one or two conversations, but nothing at great length, nothing where you're talking about your past or sharing anything of emotional depth. Like you're keeping it like at the level of a job interview, and then moving to text and kind of doing that. But the whole goal is to meet sooner than later. So then you meet for coffee. So if you do meet and boy, they don't look anything like their picture, or that's a really old picture, or that's not even them, or there's just no chemistry, then that way you have kind of a built-in out where you're not stuck for 3 hours doing dinner and a movie and whatnot. It's just, hey, let's just meet and see if there's a connection, kind of, no pressure, like nothing, and then go from there. It's really easy, especially if we're spending a lot of time talking and texting with the person, and it goes on for hours. And I'm guilty of all of this too. So, that it can go on and on and on, and it can feel like there's this connection there. And then it's really awkward if you meet and there's not that connection there. Or, like I said, their picture is not them. And it's sort of like, oh, I feel so violated. I just have totally poured out my whole heart to this person. My brain has worked up this whole fantasy of what they're like, and they're nothing like this in person. and it's not on them, like it's on me. Like I just ran too far with the ball. And so lesson learned, meet sooner than later and don't get emotionally invested in a person right away. Just go slow. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Kana says, these online men are too insecure to even do a phone call. They just want to text. Yeah, the world has really moved to doing like text only, but I won't meet a person unless we have a short phone call. I have really found, and I get it, I'm a big text person too, but I have found that there's different types of chemistry that you can have with the person. And it's weird when you realize that. Like you might click, you might read their profile and feel like, oh man, this person's really articulate, or I love their pictures, or, I just love the way that they write. And then it's different with email because then now there's two people involved, right? Like there's kind of this back and forth. And then with texting, it's more of you can really get a feel because with both email and a profile, it's more scripted. A person has more time to, kind of script how they want to portray themselves, right? Texting is more instant. So you can kind of see, like, do you click? Do you have kind of the same sense of humor? Is there just kind of that connection there? And then there's a different level of chemistry over the phone. Like, how does the conversation go? Is it like super awkward and stilted and, you know, it's tense and it's just kind of uncomfortable. And of course, that can be normal too, right? It's just anybody's going to be nervous at the first time, but on the phone. But you can kind of get a feel, like, especially I think if they come across as creepy or you can, I think, pick up more like red flag stuff on the phone. And then if you meet for 30 minutes or 45 minutes for coffee, you'll know within 10 minutes if there's enough of a connection to actually go on a real date. So, and this goes back to you setting the pace. So, if you decide, hey, you know what? Yeah, I really want to talk on the phone with you for like 10, 15 minutes and just talk. And if they don't want to do that, then done. Like just, like it's okay for you to set the pace and be like, this is how things kind of need to go. Like I need to talk to you before we meet, or I uh don't want if they're pushing you to meet for dinner, and you're like, you know what, I decided I'm just gonna let's meet for coffee. But if they're like, oh, I'm driving in from out of town and I live 2 hours away or what have you, or whatever it is, like, okay, no, we're just meeting. Like you set the pace. Like you don't need to be guilted into anything. There is no obligation. Like you can hold your ground with stuff. So okay, let's see. Scroll up here. Yeah, let me scroll down. Yeah. Missouri Cowboy says, yeah, I cannot judge those that buy into the future faking. They are excellent con artists. I bought into one future fake after another. Yeah. And I think most people do until they realize that that's what's going on. And con artists, whether they're emotional con artists or financial con artists, they do a really good job of like kind of reading their target and assessing their target and then kind of scripting their pitch to figure out what that person needs. So they come across in a wide variety of ways. And I think it was last week we were talking about that and how I was encouraging you guys that there's certain things that are helpful of like, okay, with online dating, if the person says that they're overseas because they're in the military or because they're selling a business, or whatever. But then there's other things that also don't match up. Like English is very obviously not their first language. Um, they don't want to Skype with you. They only want to do email. They're hesitant to talk to you on the phone. Then you find out that they have an accent and they give some sort of excuse that they went to university in London. Um, these kinds of things, that is 100% a scam, 100% of the time. But they can come across in different ways. So it's helpful to know how scammers for sure come across, but then also realizing that's not the only way that they can come across. Kind of like with Craigslist for a while, they had people, scam artists, offer saying like, "Oh, I'm in the military, I'm overseas, I have a car, this maybe it was like a $20,000 car. They're going to sell it to you for 10,000, but you've got to wire them or they've got to wire, I don't know. They'll wire you the money or you have to wire them the money and they'll ship you the car and then Craigslist finally put on there, like across the top of their website, any offers to ship cars are like 100% fraudulent. Like don't fall for this. And that's helpful, but then scam artists began to adjust. So then it became this whole scam with moving and rentals and saying, "Hey, I'm in the military and we're overseas, but we're moving to whatever XYZ area and I will wire you money. Can you hold it as a deposit?" And this, that, and the other, and all kinds of stuff. So they change up their game. So it's less about understanding the exact tactics, but it's more about, I think, paying attention to kind of how you're feeling in the process, because the feelings tend to be the same. It tends to feel like, "Ooh, this is kind of weird. I feel a little bit off about this. Certain things aren't lining up." It's just those little things that are off, that and that's that feeling that this is weird, this is too good to be true, this is not right. And learning to slow things down and to pay attention to that and realize that we don't need concrete proof that they're going to scam us or do these things. Like we don't have those feelings unless there's a reason for them. So to slow it way, way, way down, or to just run if you have those feelings. So let's see. Abuse Free says, "Hi Dana. I recently went no contact with my narcissistic mother. I am possibly going through grief. Can you please talk about grief stages and withdrawal symptoms from her?" Who? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I think is her name. She came up with the different stages of grief. And I think at first there were 5, but now there's 7. I'd have to Google it. That's really helpful. So I would encourage you to look that up. And everybody, when anybody goes through some sort of loss, whether it's a physical death or even like an emotional death, that we go through these stages of grief. And those stages of grief each stage lasts its own length of time. And we don't necessarily go through them in order. And we can go through them multiple times. Healing from anything is a very messy process. It's not a straight line. So that's, I think, just kind of knowing that there's going to be probably a mix of emotions. And then you might think, "Boy, I thought I was over this." And then next thing you know, bam, you're back into maybe, kind of bargaining, or that bargaining stage, or the anger stage, or, maybe even to the acceptance stage. It just kind of goes round and around until it is fully resolved. Jennifer says, "Does one go through the 7 stages of grief when going no contact like you would with death?" I would say so, yeah. Because there's a physical death and then there can be that emotional death. That's kind of grieving that loss of that relationship. It's because that's really what death is, right? It's the ending of a relationship, but with that physical death, it's very um final. right? The person, I think it's a different type of, it's on the same axis of mourning, I would say, but it's just a little bit different because I think there's more closure even with like a physical death, like you're burying the person, that relationship in that way that it was has ended. And now it kind of takes this other form of remembering this person or, um, whatnot. With that emotional death of a relationship, and I think people tend to really struggle with this, right? It's sort of like you have to kind of grieve the loss of this person that you thought you loved. So it's a very common emotion, whether that person's a parent or a significant other. And it's also, I think, grieving the loss of what you wished had been, especially with the parent child kind of a thing. With a relationship, it's grieving the loss of the fantasy of what could be, and of there's just so much. I mean, there's a wide range of things for a person to um, need some time to grieve and to be angry about and to kind of, you know, wonder about, and could things have been different, and all of that's very, very normal. Okay, let me scroll up. Oh, that's interesting. Dandelion says, no contact is like a death. So is limited contact like an illness. I'm limited with my parents and it's very difficult. That's an interesting way to put that. I guess it could be kind of considered, if their behavior, whatever that might be, is toxic to you. And if you can kind of only limit your exposure to it in order to kind of keep your safety or your sanity, it's a very hard line to walk. And I think only you can navigate that, right? So there's pros and cons to no contact and limited contact and full contact and all of these things. And it's kind of just trying to figure out, okay, what's workable? Because if you're putting yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, well, maybe full contact would be better, but then, you know, like, no, it's not, like it's destroying your life, then that doesn't work. But if no contact is too much, I can't even handle this at all. um then it's just, I guess, kind of making peace with the more limited contact that you do have. It's hard. It's a hard process, and there really is a lot of that kind of whole grieving what you wished could be, of, boy, I really wish I had this amazing mother-daughter relationship and we just don't have that. Kind of grieving the loss of that, or grieving the loss of what could be, of, boy, they're really just not going to be an active part in their grandchildren's lives, or in my life, or whatnot. So yeah, it's a wide mix of emotions. Okay, let's see here. Evil Ed says, I left my narcissist 4 years ago and I feel such happiness and freedom that I'm scared to get involved again. But at 53, I still want companionship and love in my life. Makes total sense. I think the middle ground there is just going slow. And I think it's good that you're like, you know what? Hey man, I love my life. Like, I feel happy, I feel free, I can do what I want. I value my time. I have my hobbies, I have my friends, like I do my thing. Like, I'm good. My life's good. But yeah, it's totally normal to be like, I really want to have that companionship, or want that other person around. Um, but if you really value your life, which is good that you do, so you're not looking for somebody to like complete you, right? To make you happy or to make you feel loved or to to somehow, like, you need that other person in order to feel a certain way, then if you do start getting out there and meeting other people, then you can have more of that abundance mindset of like, hey man, I've got a cake and it's already iced. Like I'm looking for candles on the cake. Like I'm not just looking for a woman, right? I'm looking for a specific type of woman with kind of these certain traits, and we're going to have this kind of chemistry with each other, and um, she's going to be a good fit for my life and I'm going to be a good fit for her life, and then it's just going to be, you know, a really nice connection. So when we get in trouble is when we start really compromising away what's important to us. That's when things, and the more we compromise, the more problems down the road things become. And Kana's talking about, yeah, there actually exists a category for some people who are addicted to being with narcissists. Yeah, I think it's not so much that they're addicted to narcissists, it's the highs and lows and the intensity of a narcissist. It's um it can be absolutely intoxicating to be the center of a person's world even if they are abusive. That sounds so twisted to say, but the bad times are so bad, but then there's this tremendous amount of relief when the good times are so good. And so other relationships can feel really flat in comparison. And that's kind of another challenge that people tend to face, is kind of being attracted to more emotionally middle ground kind of people. Because a healthy person isn't going to, there's just not that intensity. There's not that, like there's there's just not the highs and lows like that, you know? There's not the squirrely behavior. There's not the makeup and breakup. There's not the um, the yelling and the screaming followed by the kind of whole honeymoon stage where I'm so sorry, I'll do anything, you're the center of my world, I love you, you know, I'll make it right. There isn't all of that, and it can take some getting used to be like, okay, I don't know how to function with a normal relationship where there isn't that. Because if we're so used to trying to navigate somebody else's moods, especially that are very uh you kind of always, with like the outbursts of a narcissist, you kind of always know what's going on. So you learn, you're like, okay, this is how I kind of need to navigate this relationship. If I can't question them about anything, I can't disagree with them, I know what sets them off, I know what makes them happy. But with a more middle of the road partner, if they're not having these angry or emotional outbursts and they're not doing the love bombing, it can be kind of hard. It takes some practice to kind of figure out, okay, where do I stand with this person? Like I'm not getting the emotional like reactivity that I was getting with this other person. It's a learning curve. It's something totally different, and so I guess just realize that like it might feel really flat and strange, kind of like alien ground to try to navigate through, but that's normal. So, okay. Um, Taldanam and says the bitter truth is I was myself. I lost it. I was myself probably. Oh, I myself was probably a little bit of a flying monkey before I woke up. Oh, totally. I think I was too. It's if we're taking other people at 100% face value and they're feeding us this whole story, I think it's just really hard for normal, decent people to understand the level of which other people can lie and that nothing is sacred. So I think just normal, decent people tend to think, I think we almost tend to take a very kind of like comic book view of a villain. You know, they always act a certain way. Like you like the Joker, right? Like you could always see him coming. He's very clearly a psychopath. You know, he doesn't ever act like not a psychopath. And real life villains don't act like that. Like you could have, a guy who, brutally used to beat his wife come march at domestic violence parades and be all in support of other women who and all against men that hit. I mean, it's the stuff that boggles your mind that you're like, wait, what? Like I just figured if I met a guy at a domestic violence parade or whatever, that he would be a good guy. And it's like, you know, no. It's sort of like thinking that oh, well, this person that's a priest is, practices their faith that they would never hurt a child, or um we link up kind of incorrect cause and effect or correlation, I guess, all the time. That's what our brains do. Our brains are meaning making machines. And it's when based on the information that we have. And so we've been able to kind of navigate our environment for so long without a whole lot of hiccups until it's something that's like, whoa, what happened? This feels like a hit and run accident. And then we start to become aware of what it's really like to encounter a person that has no conscience. And it messes with your head. It like literally messes with your head because then your brain is working overtime realizing there's a glitch in the system here. What 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. And so your brain has spent the past however old you are, for me 40 years linking things up and making certain connections. And then it's terrifying to realize that the connections that you might have been making were incorrect. So it totally rattles a person's sense of reality for very legitimate reasons. And then a person has to kind of go back to square one and start making different connections between kind of everything, like what, because our whole our brain is designed, its number one function is to keep us safe. And if we encounter something incredibly painful, then it needs to figure that out because it needs to figure out how to avoid it next time. But if we don't know what caused us pain, then it's very common. Our brain's going to start making connection because it needs to start making connections. It can't just have that uncertainty. Like it needs to start making connections because we need that emotional stability in our life in order to move forward at all, like to get out of bed in the morning. So we're not huddled in a corner, terrified of the outside world. So, but what tends to happen is people tend to start linking up incorrect cause and effect and thinking, okay, well, it's men that are the problem. I'm just going to swear off men, and then that might work for a little while. And women especially do this. And then women will be like, okay, you know what? I'm done with men. I'm swearing them off. And then they get into a lesbian relationship. I've seen this happen probably a dozen different times in the support group. And then they're shocked and horrified to realize this other woman is even worse than the men that they've been with. And then now they're really confused. So they might swear off dating altogether, or they tell themselves, I'm never going to date an attorney again. I'm never going to date an older man or a younger woman or a redhead or a Catholic or, what have you, because they think that those are contributing factors to what the problem was. But the problem is the behavior is the problem. And so once we realize, you know, problematic behavior can take a wide, people without a conscience can take a wide, in each shape or form, any sexual orientation, any age, any gender, any profession, anything. So it's important that we see that behavior for what it is. Okay. Heather says, Dana, I'm worried that I'm a narcissist, but I read somewhere that if I'm worried about it, then I'm probably not. But I sometimes feel so mean because of how he makes me feel. But that sounds like an excuse. Can you help? So this is very common for people that have been abused. there comes a breaking point where they do start lashing out. And there's a term called reactive abuse that describes that. And so it's very, trauma is transformative. And it's very common for a person in an abusive relationship where like this other person's planting seeds of jealousy within them, um, seeds of insecurity, picking fights, the crazy making, the stonewalling, where like there's just no communication to be had, the squirrely behavior, all of this stuff kind of starts, it starts bubbling up over time. But if you're with a person who you can't question them, you can't disagree with them, you can't bring anything up with them, and their behavior continues, then all of that frustration is eventually going to boil over into hostility. That's kind of how that works. So it's very common for targets of abuse to become abusive themselves as a way of kind of um, coping with or navigating that relationship, especially if they feel stuck of like, okay, I can't leave either due to children, due to finances, due to fear. Maybe you're like, I've never been alone. We got married young and this is all I know. Uh, religion, what have you. So if leaving, and of course change is always scary. Leaving a relationship is always scary, no matter how bad the relationship is. I mean, that's, you know, we're human beings are wired for consistency no matter how. It's sort of like the we'd rather stay in hell because we know the name of all the streets kind of a thing. So it's very common for people to want to stay until they can no longer stay anymore. People, we all do this. We do this with relationships, we do this with friendships, we do this with jobs, so if leaving isn't an option, then the only other option is to figure out, well, then how are we going to stay? And if we're going to stay, but nothing's ever going to be resolved and we can't bring anything up, then all of that frustration is going to need some sort of outlet. But I think we have to realize too that getting things resolved with this other person is not going to be the outlet that's going to work. So if you are going to stay, then you're going to have to kind of discharge that energy in other ways. Going to the gym, developing more hobbies, painting, gardening, doing these kinds of things. And this isn't to say that you can't work on, you know, I don't even know. It's a fine line with trying to work on being assertive, like in setting boundaries, because your boundaries and assertiveness isn't why there's a breakdown in communication. It's them. Um, but I don't know. I think the stronger you become in your own life with your hobbies and all of that, then the more empowered you'll be to make some sort of decision down the road, whatever that might look like. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Cindy says, "Hi, Dana. I'm going to trial next week for domestic violence. He's a former cop and his dad works for the courthouse. I'm 5'1", he's 6'2", and the small town is all sided with him. I left after 30 years. I'm just broken." Oh, I admire your strength for how far you've come. 30 years is a long time. And it's hard when it's a small town and everything that you're saying, it's really hard. I would strongly encourage you, there's a ton of support groups out there. I have mine on my website, thriveafterabuse.com. There's also a Facebook group if you want to join. You may want to, if you do join the Facebook group, you may want to create a separate account if you think that they might be watching. So just kind of keep that in mind. Get support. Get support. And I think the more that you can realize that you're not alone, that there's a lot of other people out there that are in a very similar situation, there's kind of comfort in that. So there's this term, and I forget which book it came from, Respect Me Rules, maybe, about bookending. So, and I just love this concept so much. And it was So before you're going to go do something that's incredibly stressful, like going to this trial, to get support, makes time to get support ahead of time, whether that's meeting with a therapist or a friend for lunch, or being online with your support group saying, hey guys, I'm going to be going in here in the next 20 minutes. Can you please, send some thoughts and prayers my way, or I'm so scared. I just, I could really use some support. And then after the trial, getting support again. So, and whatever that might look like for you, I just love that technique so much, instead of kind of suffering through this alone and then waiting until we can't handle it anymore and then getting support. So really planning ahead to get support ahead of time and then afterwards is huge, 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 huge. And James talking about back to the brain stuff, he says, yes, we typecast because our brain must come up with a reason. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting, you know, the things it comes up with that we're not even aware of. Cindy says, I'm looking for it, but my county lacks resources. Let's see. Um, so there's a couple things. So there's okay, so there first off, there's if you're feeling like you might be a danger to yourself, which I think can be a very common place where people can get to that place, okay? So there's no shame in that, but it's important that if you're feeling that low, that you're aware of it and that you're honest with yourself of, yeah, I don't know if I am safe right now, to reach out for help, to either, there's suicide hotlines out there. Just making mention of this, just to have the tools in your toolkit. You can Google the suicide hotline. There's a 1-800 number. They're open 24/7 and it's free. There's also a text line, 741-741, and somebody will get back with you, and you can text them if you're more comfortable texting instead of talking. So that's a potential resource. And then as far as support groups, like I said, there's a bunch online, a bunch on Facebook. Googling narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse, these kinds of things can help you find those kinds of groups. And let's see, Jennifer's talking about problems. Oh, sister, I hear you. She says, it just seems like each problem I have is perpetuated by a problem before that, and then a problem before that. It's like a snowball. I guess I just have to stop making excuses. Well, I think it's good that you're seeing the connection between them all. In life, that is very common. I totally hear you loud and clear. Like, this is just one thing after another, and how do I stop it? Right? How do I stop this avalanche? But kind of like what we've been saying before, is awareness is a big piece of that puzzle. So if you're aware of, hey, you know what, some of these problems are really stacking upon each other. So maybe I kind of need to start unraveling things and figuring out, okay, at what point in this, like, how did I get here? Kind of what kicked off the first thing? And if you can start examining these problems from more of a place of curiosity instead of a place of judgment, you're going to get a lot further. And because it's so easy to get caught up in that critical parent voice of, oh, you should have done different, you should have known better, blah 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 blah, and just kind of shutting that down and being like, that is not helpful at all. So let's just get curious about why you were doing what you were doing, because here's the interesting thing about human beings: every single thing that we do is to meet a need. So when you look at your behavior in that way, there was a reason. You might not, there's a very real chance that you're not aware of the reason, but there's reasons for what you're doing. So if you're not getting the results that you want, the good news is then you can shift your approach. So all is not lost. But if we're it's sort of like if you're in a hole, one of the first things you need to do is stop digging. So if you're realizing, okay, man, this is problem after problem after problem, then to kind of bench yourself and take a time out and be like, okay, I need to start examining what's going on here, and to start kind of seeing if I can slow some things down, and then to examine, okay, how do I start getting out of this hole? How can I start doing some damage control here? So it's yeah, I get where you're coming from more than I would like to admit. Yeah, okay. Let me scroll up here. Sort of like the old saying goes, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And there's so much truth in that. And I think that can help when we are faced with a bunch of problems from life to realize that that's exactly what's going on. And that I guess that's exactly the mindset of cultivating curiosity instead of judgment of okay, sometimes we learn. And so now we need to kind of just take the lesson, instead of thinking of it in terms of like, oh, we lost. It's like, no, it's not over. Like you didn't lose. There's a lot of lessons in this. There's a lot of learning that can come from this. Ocean Flower asks, who can help you get away or disappear if the police don't help? I would contact a domestic violence agency. And if you don't have one in your immediate area, start contacting ones in different cities. And here's the thing too with domestic violence shelters and such. They all tend to be their own entity. So they tend to all have their own funding and they all get funded differently. So so basically what I'm saying is if one tells you no, that they can't help or what have you, call another one. You just sometimes have to keep calling and then letting them know your situation. I feel like I'm in extreme danger and um I feel like I need to leave and I need to get out of here. And is this something, could you potentially help with? And, um, that you're afraid for your life or whatnot. So, depending on the urgency of the situation and all kinds of, you know, there have been a lot of kind of relocation things that I've been a part of. We've had women get bus tickets. We had one gal, it was so sad. She was just such a lovely young woman and had a young baby and was uh, you know had gotten pregnant by this complete psycho, and she was terrified. She was so terrified and she didn't trust anybody, and so we ended up getting her two tickets, basically each going in a different direction, and we never knew which direction she chose. And I think that was actually very wise of her, because it's amazing how you just don't she was very smart to do that, because you just don't know what other people might be thinking. Even staff at a domestic violence shelter, you know, because somebody might call and say, oh, I'm so and so's mother and I'm really concerned about her. And can you just please let me know where she is? And if you can get a staff member that thinks, oh, but it's her mother, it's not her abuser, and it's not her mother, or maybe her mother is also abusive. Like you don't know. So, um, I guess the point of that is sometimes they can help get you out of town. Sometime, and I would kind of keep it close to your chest about where you are going to go. I would definitely get a PO box whenever you do get to where you're going, and don't ever give out your physical address. Nobody needs that. Like, you can give out your PO box. So if you're going to lay low, definitely lay low. Like, change your Facebook profiles, make sure that you have location services turned off on Facebook and Instagram and these kinds of things. So it's not updating your city whenever you post. those kinds of things. But a lot of shelters can help with getting a person out of town. And if they can't help, sometimes churches can. So there's resources out there. It's kind of finding them that can sometimes be the challenge. Oh, I love that. Karen says, I heard a great quote recently that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. It's from Kierkegaard. Yes, that's so true. Okay, let's see here. Scrolling, scrolling. Yeah, Truth Seeker says, when I'm assertive with healthy people, it works out well. When it's with a narcissist, it's designed to cut them out when they become abusive. Yeah. It's the whole kind of paying attention to how somebody responds to you setting boundaries. If people have that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication, it's so nice. Like it's just so refreshing to clear the air because any dynamic between two people, there's going to be rocky times. There's going to be tense times. And so it's not about having a relationship that's completely, void of conflict. It's how we handle conflict. And that's the exact difference right there. If the other person has that, closed off, dishonest, insincere um communication that's not solutions oriented but a big power struggle, like that's not workable, you know? So, but if you are with somebody where you're both able to kind of bring up conflict stuff, you're able to say, hey, these are my concerns, or this isn't working for me, or hey, I'm feeling frustrated, or hey, can we talk about this, or these kinds of things. When people can continue to resolve conflict, then a relationship can become a lot stronger because it's um I think that's oftentimes how relationships get strengthened is during tough times like that. But it's like I can't stress that point enough, but it's when both people have that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. If only one person has it, it's not going to work. So, okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Truth Seeker says, I'm glad to be connecting to my assertiveness and healthy anger away from them now. Yeah, that's so that's so awesome. When you can really reclaim your power, it's just such a game changer. I think it was, I don't know if it was yesterday or last week, I don't remember, but talking about just continuing to practice these skills, and you really do get to this place where maybe not 100% across the board, but and I think in a lot of the major ways that really kind of move the needle, certain these certain skills you just get down pat to where it becomes effortless. But when we're first practicing them, it's so uncomfortable and so awkward, and it's just tense, and it just is, oh, it's just awful. But over time, man, it's become so effortless. And then it's sort of interesting because we kind of wake up one day and we realize that we just don't have the same issues in our life anymore. And they can almost feel like, oh, well, it's, maybe there's a whole different set of people in our life, and that's why. But I think 9 times out of 10, it's the way that we're interacting with these people where just things just don't get to that point that they were getting to before. Because if we were waiting until, okay, it's outrageous, like I can barely hang on anymore for this to be a problem, if we back that way up and we start setting boundaries or start asserting ourselves, ahead of time. And because it's when you just realize that you have value, being assertive doesn't feel like you're being aggressive. It just feels like it's the most natural thing in the world to do. And so it just really kind of becomes this flow of if a person asks you to do something and it's not something that you want to do, it becomes a lot more natural just to value your time. Sort of like we were saying about the whole, if a person wants to go on a 3-hour date and you want to go to coffee, instead of feeling bad or guilty or, oh, but they're driving so far and I just don't know and I should really do this. And even though I don't want to, but that would be rude of me. And, sort of like it's just you just effortlessly skip over all that, you just jump over that little hurdle and it's sort of like, hey, you know what? Let's do coffee instead. I'd love to grab a cup with you and, you know, just effort. It's just so much easier. Grace says, Dana, how do you tell the differences between normal hiccups and the hiccups that we had with a narcissist that happened to be red flags in the end? Well, there's a, it's a big question. It's a good question. It's a big question. I think what jumps out at me the most with your question is it's the red flags. Red flags, first and foremost, they're more often felt than seen. And they tend to happen early on, and we tend to gloss over them. So it's not that the red flags show up at the end, they show up in the very beginning. It's just we're justifying them somehow. So it's kind of examining, what are we justifying, and kind of that, man, I tell you, it's that first, if we can examine what happened, what was going on in our life, 30 days before we met them and 30 days afterwards, if you can kind of narrow it down to that little window of time, that's going to tell you a lot of what was going on. So uh as far as red flag stuff go, it's a lot, has a lot more to do with how you feel. So it's the feeling of, this is off. This is too much too soon. This person seems very immature. They're they're wanting to just move too fast. It's concerning how they are, how pushy they are, or how aggressive they are, or how rude they are, or not understanding they are, how difficult. And here's another thing too: when we first start kind of waking up to this, we might be quick to kind of chalk a lot of the stuff up to intuition of, and that's fine. I don't, you chalk it up to whatever you want to chalk it up to, but the more you start, I think, understanding manipulation and um, why you were feeling the way you were feeling of, and that's valid. Like, okay, this person was really pushy and that was concerning, or like you're just, I think the more you understand the kind of verbal abuse and controlling behavior, what manipulation is, those kinds of things, when you start coming across it more and more, you're going to spot it sooner and sooner. And so those red flags won't seem so um, kind of nebulous. You'll be able to more accurately pinpoint kind of what's going on, of like, okay, this person's really love bombing me, or that was incredibly condescending, or that silent treatment is abusive. These kinds of things, like you just have a better feel for kind of what's going on, which then once you kind of know what's going on, it's a lot easier to hop out of harm's way instead of hanging on till the very end, till we can't hang on anymore. So I think so many of us, for whatever reason, didn't really have deal breakers. We thought commitment was forever, love conquers all. We had this very idealized version of love, and that's all of that is great if it's between two healthy people. But if you've got that kind of belief system going and you get tangled up with a pathological person, or even a person who's somewhat kind of sinking you, then it can really lead a person very far away from kind of who they, you know, like who they are. It can lead them into a lot of trouble, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But um, if you can realize like there's like, commitment isn't about staying with the person no matter what they do to you. Like it's okay to have deal breakers and standards. It's healthy to have deal breakers and standards, and that your wants and needs matter, and these kinds of things. So, and here's the other part to that is, we talk about like narcissists and sociopaths and this kind of stuff, but like I was saying just a second ago, a person doesn't need to be like full out, pathological personality. They only have to be a little bit toxic to make you sick. So, really kind of reeling back that criteria of what's not acceptable for us, and then how we respond to that and in our life. And that's, I mean, I can't stress that enough. I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with of, okay, I'm feeling you know, a bunch of things seem off. This seems really weird. Here's other signs. Here's other signs real quick of you're experiencing red flags. If we're feeling confused about something, if we're asking other people's advice, generally people ask for advice when they know the answer, but they wish they didn't. I did not come up with that quote. That was from somebody else, but I don't remember who. But that's so true. It's because we are in denial about what we're seeing, and we are emotionally invested in the truth being something other than it is. So if you're finding yourself asking your friends, asking a therapist, is this what's going on? Is this a problem? Is it not a problem? Trying to justify it, it's a problem. Because don't, when we're not in situations that are problematic, we don't wonder if they're a problem. We're calm, we're comfortable, like you're even keel. So think that this is a concept that comes from Psychopath 3, but he talks about getting a constant, like basically getting grounded, thinking about how do you feel around somebody that's emotionally safe? You feel calm, you feel comfortable, you feel like you can breathe, you feel good, you feel nourished, you feel like you can be yourself, you feel even keel. That's kind of not kind of, that's how we feel when we're with, the right kind of people. And the right kind of people are going to vary from person to person. So, you know, but not by a lot. I should say that. So it's kind of the basics. Like emotionally safe people feel like emotionally safe people. If it feels really extreme, like I was saying before, this is over the top. This is a fairy tale. This person's a soulmate. They're like prince or princess charming. That's us not seeing the situation clearly. They may or may not actually be even manipulating us into not seeing it clearly, but we for sure aren't seeing it clearly. So that's a sign to slow way down. If we're feeling anxious, nervous, unhinged, crazy jealous, all of this stuff, and we don't normally feel that way in relationships, then, you know, frustrated, anxious, depressed, agitated, hostile, aggressive things, especially if we don't normally feel that way. These are all signs that you're with a toxic person, that you're in a toxic relationship, because the reason we tend to feel that way is there is no solutions oriented communication. There is no open, honest, sincere solutions oriented communication. It's the opposite. It's closed, it's dishonest, it's insincere, it's a power struggle. That's gonna, everybody's got their breaking point. That's crazy making stuff because it's just this, you know, like insanity. You're just spinning your wheels and screaming into the wind and not getting anywhere. So knowing how you feel in these around different types of people and trusting that those feelings it really is. It's and I still get caught up in it from time to time. It's really easy to second guess yourself and to wonder if, well, maybe, am I scared to be loved because this person seems so amazing, but I'm really freaked out by it and I'm having nightmares and it reminds me of my ex and like pay attention to that. Odds are there's stuff going on there that you're not seeing, but your subconscious mind is picking up on. Or if you're feeling like I have a really dark vibe about this person and I can't quite pinpoint it and I'm really freaked out, but I don't want to be too judgmental. I don't want to lose a good person because maybe, because I have PTSD or I have issues with commitment or men or whatever. Normally, we don't feel that way. Like, I'm really freaked out. You know, I have a dark vibe about this person. Like, we don't feel like something's really off unless something's off. And it will take a little while for you to get your sea legs with kind of building that confidence and you can trust how you feel. That just takes practice. And again, kind of back to meetup.com, I'm a big fan. It's so much easier to practice these skills in a way that you're not emotionally invested in. So go into different meetup groups, kind of people watching, interacting with people that you may never see again, just for practice of paying attention to body language, practicing tuning in to how do you feel around certain people. And if something feels off, then taking some time to reflect on that. Like, here's another tip. So asking yourself, okay, what was it that feels off about them? To get around that judgment part of your brain, we all have it. A great way to bypass this, because your brain might jump to, well, I don't know. I don't know. Like something just kind of feels off, but I don't know. Asking yourself, and it's okay if you don't know. If you feel like something, if you're in danger, just get out of harm's way. Like you don't need to sit there and analyze it. But if you're in your car, you're in a safe place and you're kind of trying to figure out, okay, what about them was off? If your brain says, well, I don't know, ask yourself, okay, if you did know, what would you say? And it allows your brain to kind of take the pressure off of finding like the one thing. So it's amazing the stuff that we can come up with. Like, well, if I did know what felt off, it was the way that that person looked at me or the fact that they parked their car so close to mine in a deserted parking lot or and it might not feel logical because we oftentimes feel like we need that concrete proof in order for anything to feel valid. It's not about us, determining whether or not for sure what their intentions are. It's just about us tuning in to paying attention to how we feel around certain situations and why. Picking up on those little things. This person was walking maybe a little bit too close to me, or they looked at, you know, a 14-year-old girl and like a little bit too long, or they just said something, it's just those little things that we want to give other people the benefit of the doubt, but it's really important that we see things clearly and then to not feel guilty for thinking the worst of somebody. So, okay. Let me scroll up here. No contact ever says meetup people are mentally ill. Well, it's a mixed bag. It's the general public. So there's some people out there that are, really going to be not your people. And then there's some people out there that are going to be really awesome. And every meetup is different, because you'll find like maybe one meetup group has like 4,000 members. And then you guys go out for dinner. There's only 20 of you that show. And then maybe the next group, it's a different 20 people, So it's just, I said, it's hit or miss and it can be good practice nonetheless. So Mm, that's very true, Missouri Cowboy. It says, a concept that assisted him when he was, quote unquote, in pain was that in that intense soul devouring pain. He says, I thought that meant I was in love, yet I was in pain. Um, and in his thinking, pain, if pain equals love, because it doesn't, right? Because if pain does not equal love, then he says, then I could say, I pain you. Yeah, I like that. There was a gal that did a TED talk about love a while back, and she was just starting to kind of touch on that concept. And I was like, lady, keep going. Like, you're so there. But she just kind of skirted the issue. But she brought up the same thing. She's like, she had this realization of that what we so often consider love is like, oh man, this is soul crushing, bringing out, homicidal rage in me, love. And it's like, wait, what? Like, that's not, that's intensity. Those are intense feelings, but that's not love. Like, love is a deep sense of appreciation for another person based on them having, solid things about them in which to appreciate. So it's not this crazy, unhinged, jealous, insecure, I want to key their car, you know, craziness. Like, that's not love. That's oftentimes a really great sign that there's emotional abuse going on, because true love is, it's calm, it's safe, it's secure, it's nourishing, it's not craziness, but it feels like love because there's a lot of the same kinds of chemicals that are involved in both. That's why we can get so confused. It's and there's a lot of our wiring in our brain that kind of things get tangled up, that kind of just run things kind of run a similar circuit as other things. It's like you eat a really good sandwich and it feels like amazing. Like, oh, this feels intense. You hear a lot of food addicts. They'll talk about, oh, this food is better than sex, or this food is like love. It's the same kinds of chemicals that are going on in a person's brain with certain substances, you know? So it's just interesting how all of this stuff works. And when we start kind of untangling it and realizing, hey, wait a minute, this isn't the same thing. This kind of unhinged craving that I have for this other person isn't love. I feel like I'm craving heroin or a cigarette, and that's not healthy. So that's not love. There's more going on there. Okay. Did I set my timer? No, I did not. Okay. What time? 8:30. 11:30 would be 3 hours. Okay, so we need to wrap it up. It's about time. Um, let's see here. Scrolling. Gigi, okay, we'll kind of end with this. Gigi says, abuse is not love is my mantra in these moments. Yeah, that's huge. Huge, huge, huge. Keeps the person grounded. I'm such a big fan of mantras. One of my mantras lately has been, uh, I guess it's been more the concept of learning to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And especially with certain feelings like, anxiety or, I guess mainly anxiety, like nervousness, like doing the live streams or, um, just tying up some loose ends in my life that are still going on, it, doing that kind of stuff that's really uncomfortable, having conversations, like confrontation kind of conversations that are uncomfortable but that need to happen, getting getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and realizing, okay, this is just a part of it. And it's sort of like removing the thorn, like the thorn in your paw. Like, you have to kind of do it in order to heal or order to kind of get the result that you want. It's a needed discomfort, I guess is what I'm saying. And so one of my mantras around that has been, I can handle this. I can handle this. So, and that was just really huge. What was that from? I think that was from that book, Emotional Blackmail. Her mantra was, I can stand this. So, potato, whatever resonates better with you, if it even resonates at all. But I like that. I can handle this. I can handle this. I can handle it. It's just very powerful because I tell you, so oftentimes we don't know if we can, and then things get so bad and we're like, oh no, can I handle this? And it's like, yeah, you can get through this. You really, really can. Like, this is not, I think traumatic events of any kind, whether it's going to court, getting a divorce, even something moving, even doing your taxes, anything like that, that's brings about a lot of anxiety. uh, it can feel, especially more like long term events, right? Like divorce, moving, that kind of stuff. It can just feel like it goes on forever, but realizing it's just a chapter in the book of your life, you know, and you can start another chapter at any time. So there's not this even though it might feel like this is just going to be the rest of your life, that you can live your life in chapters. So, and you can handle this. You can handle this. You guys are doing a great job. And you're doing so many of the right things. I think that's important to acknowledge too. So, okay. So, with Stacy says, I love you, Dana. Oh, well, thank you, Stacy. I love you too. And with that, let's take a moment to just chill out and get comfortable. Okay, Manju, I think I saw you had messaged me on Facebook. I will work on that. Get to the bottom of that probably tomorrow morning, okay? So, okay, so let's take a moment. We'll just kind of get grounded and then we will call it a night, and I will see you guys next week. So take some time, get comfortable. If you're in a chair, find a spot that feels good. If you're lying down, take some time to just get comfortable, get grounded. Let's take some deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Realizing that it's okay for you to take some time to just be here in the moment and to relax. And that even though there might be stress or anxiety or tension going on in your life, it's okay that you can set it down for a little while, and you can pick it back up again when we're done if you so choose. So let's take a moment right now, and I'd like for you to visualize taking your hand and just scooping up any pain, anxiety, stress, tension that you feel in your body. Visualize just kind of raking it into one little area. noticing the size of the pile that you've kind of raked there. And then reaching down with one hand, or if it's a bigger pile, two hands, picking it up like you would a stack of leaves, pile of leaves, I guess. Picking it up as a pile of leaves and then taking it and setting it down. And then when we're done here, you can make the decision to pick up all or part of that pile. Okay. So now that you have all of that, as much of that tension and anxiety and pain raked up and placed aside, let's do the next 5 breaths in. And with each breath, actually, let's do more than that. Let's do 12. The next 12 breaths, with each breath in, I'd like for you to visualize a very regenerative, restorative type light, beautiful, white, cleansing, healing light. Breathing that in, sending it all through your body, noticing if that breath, kind of the areas that it goes to, and if there's resistance in other areas. So kind of just paying attention to your breath. And then as you exhale, visualize any remaining pain, stress, or anxiety that you might be storing in your body, and visualize it as any shade of gray as you exhale. And so generally, the darker the color gray tends to be the more intense anxiety, depression, pain that you're holding on to. So let's do that for the next 12 breaths. Okay. So breathing in through your nose, sending that white light all throughout your body, and then exhaling. Noticing the color of gray that you are exhaling. It might be light, like a light fog, or it might be really dark, like a diesel exhaust, or it might be somewhere in between. And there is no judgment, just only observation. So breathing in again, that very light, healing light, sending it all down your body, down your legs, down your arms. Exhaling. And as you inhale, and if you notice that breath is just really struggling to get to certain areas of your body, maybe they kind of feel blocked off, focus on sending more breath to that area. Maybe you visualize those kind of blocked off areas as kind of compacted soil. And that breath, with each breath, is kind of drilling down through that hardened soil, breaking it up more and more with each breath. And then exhaling all of whatever might be kind of that blockage in you. Continuing to breathe. If you're on your own another time doing this exercise, continue to breathe, focusing on your breathing, breathing in the white healing light, exhaling I would say, any uncomfortable emotions that you're ready to release. And keep doing this until you're inhaling that white light and then you're also exhaling that white light. Every time you do this exercise, the number of breaths might differ, and that's okay. And this is a great way to kind of get in tune with what all is going on with your body and with your subconscious mind, stuff that you might be holding on to that you didn't realize that was still being stored in your body. Once you get to a place where you're breathing in that white light and you're exhaling that white light, take some time now to visualize sending out some of that healing white light into the world, kind of connecting you to everything that is good and right with your life and with just life in general. Perhaps that's sending some of that energy out to people, perhaps other people in this chat, perhaps other people in your daily life, perhaps to animals, perhaps all of the above. So, taking some time to send that light out into the world and giving those people or those animals a really nice, energetic hug, letting them know just how much you value them. Being completely in the present moment as you have these just beautifully pure exchanges with other people. And when you're ready, come on back and give yourself a really big, energetic hug, coming from a heartfelt place, letting yourself know that you matter and that you are so valuable, that there is only one you, that there is so much right about you, and there really is still so much right about your life. And ideally, getting to the place where you can feel comfortable and confident, letting yourself know that you love and accept yourself completely. Doesn't mean that we're perfect, doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. Just means that who we are today, that there is still so much right with us. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. So, thank you so much for joining me. Hi, Doug. Doug says, sending all light and love, peace and healing. I hope you are doing well, Dana, and thank you for all you do for everyone. Thank you, Doug. It's always such a pleasure to see you, and I just love your attitude and the amount of positive energy that you always bring. So glad to see you around. So thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you guys next Tuesday. Angie and I will do our live stream over on her channel, so make sure you go meet us over there, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday. And then if not, then I'll see you here Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So you guys take care and have a really great rest of your week. Okay. Good night.